All right, welcome to the True Stripes podcast. My name is Neil from Northtown Tigers. This is a podcast where we talk about business and marketing and authentic branding. Today, our guest is Julio Marshall, who's a sales and marketing expert in the fitness space. Julio, thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely. No, thanks for having me. This should be a fun podcast.
Yeah. So definitely want to talk more about the fitness industry, marketing and branding in that space. But first, let's hear more about you. I know you've had a really cool career path, including playing college basketball. Tell us kind of from the beginning how you got to the place that you're at today.
Yeah, definitely. It really started I've been an athlete my entire life. So I think that's the foundation of who I am. Going through the youth circuit for basketball and different sports, and then going through high school, playing in college. Um, I really think that defines who I am today, as far as like my work ethic and respect and authority and leadership. I've always kind of used what I've learned, and I've just built intangible skill sets from being an athlete. So I would say, that is probably the foundation of where I am today, to be honest. And I say that because I think as I've grown through my career, I've heard a lot of how do you hire people and what do you look for in skill sets and intangibles and who's coachable. And it's funny because a lot of that relates back to what you learn as being an athlete. So I would say definitely, as a kid, as a youth, as an adolescent, growing up through adulthood, that's been a big foundational kind of tool for me to lean on in everything that I do. So
Yeah, I mean, I didn't play college sports or anything like that, but played a lot of sports growing up, and I can definitely see that connection. I mean, pushing yourself as an athlete is such a mental thing, and you're even in team sports, you're part of a team, but you're on your own, and you need to find your own motivation. And I can totally see that connection between the kind of mental side and the personal side of sports, and then succeeding in business.
totally. Yeah, and especially in sales, right? Like
Yeah.
you're going to suffer a lot. You're going to suffer a lot of losses, and you're going to have to stick to a script, and you're going to have to follow a playbook. And there's just so many parallels.
Yeah. So played college sports. How do you transition from that into the sales and marketing world?
Yeah, I was. Sports were over for me, and I had to figure out what was next for me in life. I never really prepared for that. I kind of envisioned just being a basketball player forever. It was a dream. And when I finally came to realization that was over, I focused a little bit more on my education. And I kind of looked at what was my next step in life. And I wanted to kind of just get a little bit more of an educational foundation to support that. So I ended up double majoring while I was in college after I got done playing basketball. It took me an extra 2 years, but I got a bachelor's in exercise science. I originally was on the physical education path, and I still got my degree in that. But I double majored in exercise science, and that led me into the health and wellness world, the wellness space. I originally wanted to be an OT, and I didn't want to take the GMAT to get into master's school for that. So I ended up going to get my master's in sports management. So that was probably the start of my path in sports and wellness and health. And it was always obviously my passion as a kid and as a college athlete. So having that educational foundation probably is what what is how I sprung into this industry. And while I was getting my master's for sports management, I picked up a job as a personal trainer. So that was really my step into the real world. Hey, you got a real job, you got to pay your bills. But I wanted to do something that I knew I was passionate about, that I wanted to learn, and that I knew I had that I pretty much prepared myself for. So as a personal trainer was my first real job in this industry back in 2010 with the Wisconsin Athletic Club.
What did you learn as a personal trainer? Like, I imagine that's a super competitive industry. You're going
Yeah.
against other personal trainers. You're going against any kind of self-guided or just machine that promises that they can guide people on their own. What did you learn from that experience? Because I imagine that was could be tough at times.
Yeah, it was huge. There's a ton that you can take away from being a personal trainer, and you can make a really good living being a personal trainer forever too. So for me though, what I learned was it was the early mornings. It was going out there and just grinding to get your business, build relationships, and you got to sell. You got to be able to sell yourself. You got to be able to build your own personal brand. And back in 2010, when I first started, I was with the Wisconsin Athletic Club, who is a well-known brand here in southeastern Wisconsin. Great club, great people. They've been in this industry forever. So there were leads that came through the door. So I always was asking for new members to be able to set up assessments and just get that first introduction, that warm introduction. But after a couple months, you realize that's just not going to support your business. That you're not going to earn a good income that way. So you have to go out there and be there constantly at the gym. You just got to learn how to network with people. So you don't really realize it when you first start out as a personal trainer. But you're building a lot of skills and you're developing a skill set that is transferable to a lot of other occupations and jobs. For me, it was sales and marketing. I was learning things out there in the field as a personal trainer that I wasn't necessarily learning in school. So I wasn't a classically trained sales guy. I wasn't a classically trained marketing guy. But I picked up a lot of that stuff just organically, going out, networking, building the right relationships, putting myself in the right circles of people. And from there, it's just, I've built a good client base. So you learn how to manage your own business and manage your own book. You understand that there's your income is basically how much you work. So you have to put in a lot of hours. So things like that.
When you're doing that, when you're networking, when you're building that business, was, a lot of that is just like starting to talk. You just got to talk to people, right? Like you have to go out there, you have to be social. Is that something that came easy for you? Is that a skill that you learned? I mean, so much of sales is just like being like turning on that extroverted side of you, striking up conversations. Is that like a skill you had to develop? Did that come easy to you? How was that?
I would say probably, yeah. I mean, something that's innate to people, if you just have that extroverted personality.
Yeah.
Being in sports, that kind of forces you and guides you and grooms you to be vocal, to be confident, to carry yourself in a certain way because you're in competition. So I believe if you're in sports, there's things that you're developing that you don't realize that are going to be transferable later in life. For me, so yeah, networking was something that just came natural to me. What was unnatural and uncomfortable for me, maybe because I had just the lack of confidence at a young age, was talking to wiser people, some of the older generation that was a little bit wealthier, established. As a young personal trainer at 21, 22 years old, you don't necessarily feel like you fit in, right? So you got to get over the hump of just starting conversations with those people in those networks in that society. And then you blend in really easily because what you realize is you have something that they want. You have youth, you have a knowledge base, you have an image, and it's something that people are attracted to. So it actually becomes really easy to blend in with that society once you kind of get over that hump of confidence.
That's interesting. I mean, yeah, like I can see that too, right? Being super intimidated by some like 50 or 60-year-old wealthy person or something, but ultimately you do have you do have a skill that they don't have, or you have youth, or like you as a young personal trainer just came out of college sports. I mean, that's that's a cool offering to be like, come train with me, right? Like you're in your time. But I think there's probably a life lesson in there, like even regardless of what age you're at, you have some angle probably to play with people and say, you might have all this, but I know this thing.
Totally, right. And that's what they're looking for too, right? Like what I found, mentorship is something that I've always leaned in hard to. I try to mentor younger people as well because it was something that guided me in life. They want to help. The older, wiser, more experienced people in this world that have gone through it already. If you're showing that you want to be helped, if you're asking questions and you just put yourself out there, you're going to find somebody that has been there and done that is willing to help you, willing to guide you and mentor you. And it's just, they want to see that you have that motivation and that confidence to take those next steps, and they're there.
Yeah. Yeah. I found that so much increasingly in life too, that like I think sometimes we have this preconception in our heads that like everyone's going to say no to you about everything. Right. And the truth is, if you just start talking to well, a lot of times you're blown away by how nice everybody is, at least in the
Yeah.
Midwest. These are where we live. Like people are generally nice. They want to
Yeah.
help. And if they're not the
Yeah.
right person for you or the right target for your business, they probably know somebody who is.
Yeah. And I always say this, it's so much easier being a sales guy in the Midwest than it is in New York and LA and Miami. It's just, it's a good old Midwest conversation that's probably going to last a little too long,
Yeah.
but you get a lot of information and you build a relationship. It's something about the Midwest is a little different.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so you become a personal trainer. Eventually, you hook up with a company called FITBENCH. Tell us about how that started, how that evolved, and what was with that.
Yeah, so I was a personal trainer. I actually got recruited out of there to go to this company called Second Wind Exercise Equipment, and it was a specialty fitness dealer, and they basically dealt with the verticals. So everything outside of health clubs and boutique studios, so hospitality, municipalities, corporate wellness, multifamily, PT, OT, rehab. So those markets that aren't your foundational markets of the health club industry. And they represented a lot of brands. So I got lucky. I really did. And I say this all the time. Pete Lundstrom, he's a vice president over at Torque Fitness. He was the one that hired me at the time. He took a chance on me, but he took a chance on me because of all those things we just talked about. He wasn't looking for a veteran. He wasn't looking for somebody that had an established skill set. He was looking for somebody that had what I was bringing to the table as far as just jumping into being a personal trainer, just taking a leap from LA to North Dakota to Wisconsin. He saw intangibles that he could work with to develop what I became. So I got lucky because it was a B2B commercial sales job and I had no B2B sales experience. I was a personal trainer and I was, arrogant probably. And I was like, yeah, I know sales. I sell personal training, but man, I had no idea.
It's probably good to have that youthful, being like a little bit naive, but ready to jump into it.
Yeah, but I mean, he was looking for that, right? And he gave me I got the offer, and I basically had all of Wisconsin, which to me at that time was just like, whoa, how am I going to do this? I mean, traveling through just 2, 3, 4 hour road trips, covering all these different market segments, selling, 4,000 SKUs. I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but he helped me a lot. He was a big time mentor. He still is a good friend today. And he basically showed me the ropes. So I had that job for 5 years covering Wisconsin. And when I came on, I think in the years prior, we had, $400,000 in years in sales from prior reps. So year over year, it's just kind of maintaining there. And he had a different plan and he showed me the road and we just grinded it out and pounded the pavement. We were going to work harder than anybody. So we grew that thing to over $1 million. And the market in Wisconsin for Second Wind. And I learned a ton. And what I realized was, just like at the personal training job, that wasn't, I wanted more. It wasn't going to be forever for me. So I started, what's nice about that specialty fitness, the dealer market, is you get exposed to a lot. You're not just working for one brand, you have multiple brands that you represent. And you have a lot of different dealer reps that you're talking to daily, weekly, monthly. And if you want, you can jump out of that world to the manufacturer world where you work directly because you're building relationships. If you're thinking about like what your next step is and where your career path is going, I always thought in my mind, like, I got to get to the manufacturer world. I want to go on a national level. I want to work with key accounts. I want to get into working with health clubs and boutique studios. So for me, being able to have that job, when I learned the industry from the inside out, and I learned it in a way where it just was pure hard work. And I learned business sales, B2B sales. I learned all of the KPIs and management CRM systems, and I learned product, and I learned education, and I learned processes and systems. And it was 5 years of just sitting back, not having a social online presence, not having a personal brand. It was really just going out there and talking to every hotel, every apartment building, every high school fitness center that I could find on the road, and just learning it the hard way. But I think it cuts your teeth a little bit because if you don't do it that way, it's really hard to respect where it's really hard to understand the next level of business, which is working directly with health clubs. So
Yeah.
you learn all industries, you learn all products, you learn all manufacturers. You're more than just working with one brand and that SKU or that product catalog for a very specific customer. And I can't imagine that being my first job. It's just really hard to figure out the industry that way. So working at Second Wind, exercise equipment gave me that opportunity to build industry knowledge, build product knowledge, build a lot of knowledge on my customers, and really understand, who I was going to be in this industry as a sales guy working on the manufacturer vendor side. So
That's interesting what you said about doing all that, without like a personal brand and just kind of doing it through hard work, through building relationships, being on the ground. Because I think, somewhat with the digital tools that we have now, there's so much focus on like building a personal brand through social media, which is important. But like ideally that would be backed by a lot of real life relationships, right? Like I think I've fallen victim to this before too, where it's like, well, if I just push out a bunch of stuff on social, then I don't need to try that hard to build real life relationships. But like in reality, those are going to be the things that really drive your career and your business forward.
Totally. And it was true 10, 12 years ago, before, social media really was, before the personal branding of social media, I think, really took off, before the influencer stage and where everybody's an expert on an industry. You actually had to go out there and build real relationships, where when it was time for that customer to buy, they were just calling you because you knew exactly, they trusted you, right? And it wasn't because they found you from some SEO campaign or some email blast. Like, it was truly because you went there, you did a site assessment, you built out the customer profile, you knew everybody in that organization, and you kept on calling them, you're sending them emails, you're sending them thank you cards. Like, that's the traditional way, right? And it's still true today. Now we just have an added layer that if you don't utilize, as far as, social media, networking online, it's really hard to compete. So, but back then, man, I was going up against guys that had been doing this for 20 years. The guys that took around, they, as far as for like install photos and references, they took around a book, and they would show a customer, they'd flip a page like, hey, these are my customers. Like, you don't do that today, right?
It works.
You send them, and then from that it became, we'd give our customers a USB, and we'd say, hey, here's our digital file. Now you're just like, hey, check out here are my social media links. So
yeah, there are a lot of experiments there in the middle. And like, now I'm going to bring an iPad and I'll show things on iPad. It's like, things change quickly there in the sales world.
They definitely do. But yeah, so I was at Second Wind. It was time for me to move on. I just made the decision to put myself out there and let people know that I was looking to get into the manufacturer side of the business, and through some relationships I had built, some friends, I got introduced to True Fitness, which is an equipment manufacturer down in St. Louis. They've been around, family-owned business for 35 plus years, and they were starting a new objective initiative within the business to open up more reps in the country and go direct to the market. So it was really, for us, they had been in this market for a long time. They've kind of gone back and forth with some of their strategies on how they attack the market. And this was just a new business unit, in a sense, a new team of reps that were going to go after the market in a new way. And for me, that was perfect, because everything I had done in my life up to that point started from scratch. I wasn't taking a previous book of business. I wasn't taking previous relationships and building off of that. So this was, again, starting at zero. We're not looking at last year's numbers and figuring out how we're gonna boost what percentage. Like, it was just, hey, you have $0 in your territory sold. What can we do? So I worked there for a couple of years, and it was really interesting. But what it did was gave me the introduction into the manufacturing side of the business, working direct with customers. And I had the objective to go after clubs, education market, a more defined customer base. It wasn't just hitting everybody that I could see off the side of the road.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot. That way, because now I'm not working with 10 or 12 different vendors. I'm working with one vendor, one product catalog. My SKUs went down to 300 versus 3,000, and you got dialed in a little bit more. And it's a different strategy. It's a different approach. And I really enjoyed it because I got to focus more on a relationship with the customer versus just a number and what vendors I'm keeping happy with a product blend and margins. And it was just it's a little more targeted approach. And that's where I got to learn, how do you build business plans? How do you build go-to-market plans? How do you build sales plans, territory plans? So I got a little bit more of an understanding of the business side of sales and working with Salesforce and a little bit more advanced CRM systems. And I really enjoyed that. And then I also kind of started thinking about, that's where I got introduced to understanding personal branding and building. I remember very specifically when I was at Second Wind, I always believed in LinkedIn, but back then you never shared on LinkedIn who you were working with because you didn't want your competition to see.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
back then, you were like, no, we're not going to add certain competitors to my profile because I don't want them to see the customers that I'm working with, because they're going to, like, there was just like hesitation to promote what you're doing.
Yeah.
And then when I went to True, it was totally opposite. At this point, this was 5 years later. And now we are putting ourselves out there. We are building a brand. We are looking at showing off or promoting who we're working with because it built credibility and more eyeballs were on that platform. So now you're like, I don't care if you didn't care about competition as much anymore. You invited the competition because it brought you to the table for the opportunity.
Yeah.
So it was a total switch in evolution of your strategy and thought process on especially LinkedIn and different social platforms. So that's where I really started digging deeper into marketing and just understanding it more, and how leveraging your brand in that way is really powerful. So it was when I was at True.
Gotcha.
And then, I left True. My buddy, Tyler Dayton, who's actually the owner, we're neighbors. He had started FITBENCH. It had been like 2 or 3 years, kind of early infancy stage. And he was ready to truly take and grow the brand and stake a claim in the market. So we had talked about it. I was ready to leave True. There were some leadership changes and things were going on that I wasn't necessarily aligned with. Happens at big companies. And the opportunity was just perfect. And Tyler and I talked about it, and we were like, hey, let's take over the world.
Nice. So you're there now. You're ready to take over the world. What do you do first? Like, how do you dive into that challenge?
Yeah, Tyler and I had been friends prior to me going to FITBENCH, so we knew each other well, and we understood each other, like our passion for the industry. We understood our passion for sales, for relationships. We were very aligned on. We were aligned without really probably knowing it on how to do business. So when I started at FITBENCH, right away it was. And it's kind of funny because we're a 3-4 person company in a 120 square foot office space in the basement, looking to go global, right? With basically three SKUs and no freaking money. So like, what do you do? And but it's interesting because, and we talked about this off camera.
Yeah.
Over the last 3 years, we've seen a lot of new products try to break through in the market. And for us, we knew marketing was important. That was always aligned and always a top priority, but systems and processes was also as important to us at the same time as we were thinking about sales and marketing. Internally, we were building something that was desirable and attractive. We wanted to create culture. We wanted to create a team. We wanted to create a community. And how do we influence all three of those pillars and still get sales and still maintain a presence marketing and globally? Like, it just seemed like a ton. But really what we did was we sat down and we had the conversations. We talked about how do we build this organization? How do we build a sales organization? How do we build a marketing organization? How do we build an executive team? How do we establish systems and processes? And that started with one-on-one meetings. I started with team meetings. There's a really strategic and standard way to do that. And I think a lot of companies don't do that initially. A lot of startups, a lot of early stage, they get some funding and then they just create some really shiny objects in marketing assets. And then they just throw it out there to the market and they get a bunch of eyeballs on their product. And then you don't see them in a year.
Yeah.
They failed to build that foundation that's strong to fall back on, which is systems and processes, because that stuff doesn't go away. If you stick to that stuff weekly, daily, monthly, quarterly, annually, which we did, no matter what, if eyeballs fall off of your product, your business is healthy because there's a strong foundation. Eyeballs can go away from your product all day long, right? It's really hard to compete on SEO. It's really hard to compete with ad spend. But if you are building something internally in-house, if you have a solid set of core values, if you have a solid organizational structure, and you have systems and processes that your team believes in, that's never gonna go away. And I think a lot of startup young businesses skip that step, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, the startup journey is so difficult and so crazy because you're getting new information all the time, right? You're talking to new people.
Mm-hmm.
If you're bringing in investors, you get a different investor's perspective every week. But that's smart to create those consistent systems and processes and like make a commitment in advance where you're going to stick to these, right? Like for a while, no matter what happens or no matter who we talk to, or that's interesting.
And
it is a distracting
you literally sit there, and and this is my experience. And again, we've talked about, I'm not classically trained in this. I didn't read a ton of books. I didn't go to school for this. I don't have an MBA, but we sat there and we would look at each other across the table, 3-4 of us at a time, 2 of us at a time. And you have this large global view of your organization, but it's only one person in the marketing department. There's only one person or 2 people in the sales department. There's only one person on the operating side. So you have to put yourself in those positions, and you have to have the vision of what those departments are going to look like in 10 years, what that department will look like in 5 years, what's the revenue going to look like in 10 years, and how many people, what's the staff going to look like within the marketing department. And if you don't do it, if you don't have that vision globally, long term of your organization from day one, it's going to be really hard to scale to get there. You can pour millions and millions of dollars into it, but you have to build that structure internally at the very beginning, because it's hard to go back. It's hard to build those habits when you do actually have some success with some revenues. If you are a $3 million company, right, from zero after three or 4 years, how are you going to support that $3 to $4 million of business? How are you going to support those customers? How's your business going to survive that in the infrastructure of your business if you don't have some standard operating processes and systems and processes?
Well, what's ironic about your experience, like having just a small focus group of people making those decisions, is that for marketing and branding, I mean, I found that like the fewer people making those decisions, usually the better it ends up, right? Like it ends up being somebody's vision where you say, we're going to do this and we're going to go forward with that. And it's like, a lot of times companies grow and grow, which is, they want to do, but then you have 10 people in the marketing department and you have 10 different voices about what you should do. And then you end up saying like, all right, we got to silence 8 of these people and only listen to 1 or 2 of them. So it's kind of a weird, like on paper, it seems like a weakness to have a handful of people, but in reality, sometimes making decisions about marketing goes best when there's 1 or 2 decision makers.
Oh, yeah, totally. And even when there's 4 decision makers, or 4 people in the company that are making decisions for the departments, it's still difficult, right? Because now you have to align with each other, and it's only you 2 that have to figure it out together. So if you have a disagreement, you gotta figure it out together. So, and that's probably the beauty in operating lean initially and not bringing in funding, is there isn't that it's not attractive to investors. It's not attractive to private equity, because to them the scale is it's too long. Like the process to scale that they want to see is too long. They're like, oh well, I mean, if you guys aren't getting this many impressions a day, they look at data and they understand data and the money that goes into that, and ROI, and how that's going to scale your business, and ultimately what year that they should be seeing what certain amounts of revenues and
Yeah.
funds in return. But if you don't have that, you can maintain a lean operation and focus on the things like the culture and the community and the core set of values that you have, and slowly build your organization. And that's what we were doing at FitBench. So that was the beauty in what we did, was we were super lean, and there's a lot of stresses on a business that come from that, but you have to make sure that the people internally are able to handle that. You kind of got to coach them. You kind of got to build the team camaraderie, because it's really difficult. And there's a lot of high stresses that come with not being a funded operation. But at the same time, the flip side of that is we got to do things our way.
Yeah.
So we weren't reporting to a board. We weren't sure we were tracking sales, but at the same time, like, we were really happy to see the brand growth and the brand strength in the market and the awareness, because we understood that there's a lot of loyalty we were building to what we were doing. And that was true and authentic.
So when you did start to expand, you were looking for some sales and marketing help. What were you looking for out of those candidates? Like, kind of in alignment with the mission that you were having. Like, what were you looking for when you started to bring people onto the team?
Yeah, and that's a good question. What FitBench is looking for today, with any organization in that category of business, is probably not what they were looking for 3 years ago. 3 years ago, when you're just starting out, you're looking for somebody that knows how to roll up their sleeves, wear many hats, has the ability to be adaptable, and is willing to learn and take some licks. So,
Yeah.
right, I mean, all things that you probably don't really get trained at school. You can't really say, "Hey, I have a degree in this, so I can do this." Like, those, like, you have to find the type of people and typically what ends up happening is you hire people, right?
Yeah.
Like, you hire somebody off a strong recommendation. So we were trying to create job descriptions from scratch. So we were looking for people. We were looking for people that fit the job descriptions, but ultimately we had established core values. We had established a mission. We had established a vision. We established a culture to us that really the culture internally. So our core values is what defines our culture. That's what made the most sense for us to hire to. It didn't make the most sense for us to hire a veteran that was established just because he had a book of business and he could go turn some relationships and get some business.
Yeah.
To us, that wasn't important, because if you couldn't align with our core values, then you're not going to be valuable to us long term in the market, to our customers, because we need everyone that's aligned, that is rowing the boat the same direction.
Yeah, and when you have a 100-person company or something, hiring one person, they don't, unless they're like in a super leadership position, like, they don't really have the power to change your company. But when you have a 4 or 5-person company, you add another person, have a big impact on your culture.
Oh, yeah, totally. And that's everything. The way we were trying to grow and build was through authentic relationships, was through building our brand equity and awareness in the market. And that wasn't that we weren't acquiring customers through marketing, we were acquiring customers through relationships, authentically, out there with you, out at dinners and out at the bar and in your clubs and at breakfast and lunch. And almost all of our business came through authentic relationships and referrals initially. We just didn't have the funds to go out there and say, "Hey, yeah, let's go compete against Tonal and Peloton and see what kind of e-com business we can drive." Demand generation and lead gen wasn't a huge focus for us, which is crazy, because you think about it today, most of these health and wellness companies that have fitness products are leaning to demand gen and lead gen as their number one funnel for business coming inbound leads.
Yeah. It's an interesting way to think about marketing. I've seen that work effectively too, especially for smaller companies where it's not lead gen driven. So it's not like we're going to do all this marketing up here and then that'll get us into conversations. It's we're going to go out and have conversations with people, and then they're going to go to our website later to like kick the tires and make sure that everything sounds good. And it's like marketing as more that second stage of where like, yep, everything checks out. They look great, sound, everything looks just as good on their website as it was in that conversation. It's a interesting kind of reversal, I think, of the way people often think about marketing.
Yeah, and totally. Look, we had 3 different websites in 3 years, right? So we are that part of your business is constantly evolving. Um,
Yeah.
you're looking at what's attractive in the market. You're seeing what Peloton and all the leaders that are pouring a ton of money into it, what they're doing, because they've done all the research already, right? You can't really recreate the wheel there. If you're a
Right.
small company, it's really difficult unless you're an innovative programmer and developer, web dev, which is all the big companies have those guys.
Right.
So um, it's really difficult to compete in that way. So realistically, if you go target big time customers who have strong social presences and a strong image and a strong brand in the market, if you can win those customers over, have them become early adopters of your product, that is more powerful early on than going online and creating a really sexy Instagram page and a really strategic digital marketing campaign, simply
Yeah.
because the referral of a massive, well-known global customer is going to be way more powerful.
Absolutely. Yeah. The power of that could be worth hundreds of those leads that you might get through social channels and things like that.
Totally. And I mean, at the end of the day, look, we have 4 people in the company. Who's going to sit there all day and just pick up the phone and dial, right? You don't have the time. You have to manage your time wisely. And for us, it was early on. We knew we had a solution. So I mean, it all starts there anyway. We knew we were innovators, and we knew we had a solution. So we could go to some of the biggest players in the industry and present it to them. One, because we had the relationships already, but two, we could figure out exactly a business case for all of them.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty in innovative solution-based products is at some point, if you know you have the right product, it's just a matter of getting the right customers.
Yeah. You mentioned when you're looking for teammates to support that too, that you want to make sure that they are, true to the mission. I know you mentioned in the past that you at FitBench like rewrote the mission, like as
Mhm.
the company evolved. What was the trigger for that? Like what would tell you like, okay, it's time to rewrite the mission again?
It's an evaluation. You have to continually come back to the table as a team and agree together if everybody's aligned. And
Yeah.
Tyler drove this pretty passionately. I would say he was definitely the most consistent about this, was making sure that we all sat down together and believed in what we were doing. Um, and sometimes we didn't, right? So sometimes we would change it. Sometimes we just like, God, that core value is too long. Like,
Yeah.
hey,
Right.
can we chop it? This thing was we had at one point, I think we had like 10 core values and it got down to 6. And
You
then it
remember
was like
something.
it was like 4 very concise statements. So it's not a joke, and it's funny to think about it though, because there is an evolution in your core value development. Um, because it has to be something that you can also go out there and easily say and remember and portray to your customers and recite. And you don't have to be a robot about it, but at the end of the day, if you have too long of a core value, like you feel like you're a robot just trying to remember it. Like you understand the basis of it in the meaning of it, but it also needs to be something that you can just easily repeat. So
Yeah.
that's truly just part of the core value development. And it's fun at the small company early stage to be a part of that, because I feel like when you're with an established company, you lose that authenticity of that mission and that development. And you kind of have to when you're looking for companies to be a part of, you kind of go through that stuff and see if that's something you align with. Like there's not a lot of connection there between the employee and the leadership. I feel larger companies that are
Yeah.
established, startup companies, you're developing them. So you're truly just talking to each other internally and saying, hey, this makes sense. Is this who we are? And is this something that we can be true to?
Yeah, and in that size of company, you really are a major part of the company. You
Mhm.
yourself are 25% of the company or 20% of the company, whatever it is. So you
Yeah.
you being involved in creating those values is so important because ultimately it's sort of your company and you're the person who has to live it out. That's great.
And yeah, totally. And so you have to find the right people that understand the importance of that. And a lot of the times, if you're an established veteran in the industry, you you want to, especially in sales, you want to focus on sales. And a lot of the times, focusing on sales, you have a standard way of going about your business. You've created your business plan, your sales plan, and you have a territory game plan that doesn't really include traditionally looking at your core values and believing in that, and then taking that to the market and finding the customers that also align with that. That was something I was passionate about. I wanted to make sure that our customers knew our core values, our customers knew who we were. And I always, when I looked at a customer, I always went up and down their page websites in the organizations, and I always found something to attach to that our company also was about. Because then, once you get to the leadership level, those people truly do care about those missions and values and core values. And if you can kind of create that emotional attachment to a relationship and a buying process, your likelihood for a sale is going to go up.
Yeah, connecting on something as a way to start a conversation. That's huge.
Yeah. So
All right.
finding the right people, yeah, definitely, they have to align with that.
Yeah. So before we close, let's just talk about the future of fitness, what you think the future of the fitness industry is, or fitness marketing. There's so many new things coming out every year. Do you see connected fitness is something that's going to stick around? Are people going to get back to basics? How do you see things evolving in the next 5 or 10 years?
I think we're going to continue to understand the consumer a lot better. So the consumer is now going to drive a lot of decisions in the health club market. And traditionally, you had to drive a product through the business, through the health club studio market for the consumer to care about it. That was the traditional way of mattering in this industry. But I think now we have data is more important than ever. So the companies on the tech is going to continue to rise in this industry, certainly. And it's going to be more about data and understanding the consumer. So the consumer has all the power right now in this industry on the health club side. And I truly believe that. So the companies that are tech forward and are using data to make decisions on the type of products are going to thrive and succeed. So there's a lot of companies out there that Gym Revenue or ABC Solutions or Gym Pass or Mind Body that have a lot of data, or InBody, and have a lot of data on the consumer. MyZone, that's going to be huge, and that's going to continue to drive where this industry goes. As far as, in my opinion, as far as product, actual hardware in the health club space or in the fitness space, the consumer product is kind of lagging right now. I would say it's lagging in the sense that it's just slowed. So there's a little bit less of a cash influx into driving new innovation. So you're seeing kind of a lot of the same stuff out there now, a lot of repeated products. There's not a ton of, you didn't go to Ursa and see a ton of innovation. You just didn't. You saw a lot of products that are kind of recreating the brands, and a lot of products that are trying to reemerge as a major player, but you didn't see a ton of innovation. So as far as products, I think strength is probably where a lot of the focus is going to go. And it's going to be traditional strength. So you're going to have to figure out how do you set yourself apart in the traditional strength market that has been around for decades. How are you going to create a product that is going to set yourself apart? So I'm interested to see who comes out with the new strength product that is going to be a product category leader, and it's going to kind of lead the way. So to me, that's the product category to focus on is strength.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens in this industry because of some of the things you mentioned, right? Like the disruption of the health club industry during COVID, people kind of reevaluating, like, do I need a full gym membership? How often do I need to go? What is that relationship between how many things I need to do at a gym versus at home? And then, like you said, with strength, I mean, I think we've seen the last few years more women taking up strength training, more young people taking up strength training, and it's not the you know, just the male dominated sort of bodybuilder culture driving strength training anymore. So huge opportunities for brands, I think, that pick up on some of those trends.
And one last point for that too, and I want to shout out Inspired 360, my boys Jason Davis and Ravi Sharma. They, with the strength market emerging and taking over, less cardio is being purchased, floor plans are being opened up for more strength and different modalities of training. Education is going to be huge, and it's not so much content. So it's not so much what can I show you on a screen. It's more about the education, and those guys are building a platform on the education side that really is going to be something in the next couple of years that's going to matter. Because if you think about strength training, it's science based, right? And it can be dangerous if you're not doing it right. So health clubs, a treadmill is a treadmill, elliptical is elliptical. Elliptical does the whole entire thing for you.
Right, you get really
but strength training is a lot more reliant on form and your body. So education is going to be massive, and those guys are building something that's pretty powerful over there. And anybody else really out there, it's got to be some serious education that these health clubs are going to have to consider when they start evolving their strength offering.
Yeah, making sure people are doing things the right way, not injuring themselves, and
Yeah,
getting out of those workouts so that it is effective.
totally.
Awesome. Well, Julio Marshall, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a great conversation. Where can people find out more about you? On LinkedIn, connect with you on LinkedIn?
Yeah, just connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm on there daily, probably too much, but I mean, honestly, just hit me up through LinkedIn. I'll respond.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Julio. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Neil. I appreciate it. Good talk.
All right. Thanks.